Hello friends, welcome to the series Issues in World History 20th Century, and today we will talk about modernity. In the earlier lecture on modernity we talked about that how modernity and tradition they are linked to each other, how they are to be seen in that sense that they are not contradictory to each other, rather some of the modern or the ideas or aspects of modernity of today will become the traditions at a later point of time. And we also talked about the various kinds of gharanas in the framework of music when we were talking about the kind of traditions which we talked about, and we also talked about some of the aspects in the framework of modernity, that how the idea of nation state and nationhood was connected to modernity, and the ideas of industrialization and capitalism they also emerged during the modern period, and how they are also related to the concept of modernity and how it is connected in that sense. And we talked about democracy, that how it is also an important aspect as well, and the kind of changes which came in 20th century especially and thereafter, which we are witnessing in the framework of science and technology, how they are in a way seen in the framework of the modern period. It does not mean that the changes which happened in the 19th and the 18th century as well, which were in a way connected to this kind of an idea of modernity, especially in the 19th century, the arrival of the railways, telegraph, etc. They were also connected with the ideas of modernity. And this phenomena of urbanization is also very important in that sense, because we find that more and more areas they are getting urbanized, and it is also because of the fact that people they are moving from the village areas to the urban centers where factories etc. they are being set up. There are more avenues for employment in that sense. So this phenomena of urbanization is also one of the aspects of modernity as well, when we find that more and more areas they are getting urbanized. And we also see that not only the areas which are the city or the urban centers they are getting more and more urbanized, but even the rural areas they are getting more and more urbanized as well. And some of the things which were only which could only be seen in the urban centers, now they are also seen in the rural centers as well. And one important aspect which is also another which is again important is the expansion of the mass media as well. So we find that from the print media and the electronic media. Initially there was only print media, and thereafter the electronic media came, and how radio, television or cinema, all of them they played an important role in terms of modernity. And we find that the arrival of these kinds of aspects which were related to the mass media, it in a way was also important from the point of view of modernity as well. And this kind of a change in the framework of mass media is continuing even now, when we see that initially only radio was one of the mediums of communication in the framework of the mass media, apart from films which were there, which came earlier as well. But we find that the coming of the television, it revolutionized the one of the mass media mechanisms. In that sense, we find that how it could reach homes of the people, and the arrival of technology in the framework of DTH, direct to home, also revolutionized the television industry. And then coming of the various OTT platforms in recent times, we find that it is another kind of development which could be seen in the framework of the mass media, and how mass media is one of the important aspects of modernity can be seen as well. And then one is talking about that how, when one is talking about modernity, then one is also talking about the disenchantment with the world, and that how people they are getting bored and they are not finding anything worthwhile in the world. The idea of secularization is also connected with the idea of modernity in that sense. And another important aspect is in the framework of rationalization, that how we tend to in a way rationalize our ideas or things which we want to see in a particular kind of a framework. So rationalization is again an important characteristic of modernity in that sense. And we also see that because of the rising demand, the kind of markets which emerged and the availability of the products in the market, we find that more and more commodities are available, and because of which we find that many things which were not commodities, they were seen in the framework of commodities. So this is aspect which is seen in the framework of the commodification in that sense. And when you talk about these kinds of changes, you talk about mass society as well. And when you talk about modernity, we find that it can be different things in north and south. Thus modernity indicates a type of society that is more developed related to other societies. So a society is characterized by modernity is described as a modern society, and the social structure of modernity is such that it defines tradition, transition from isolated communities to mass scale society. And referred to in this manner, modernity is found there, therefore not just in West. This process can be seen as working all over the world rather than just in advanced nation. And when one is talking about mass society, we talk about the large scale movement of goods, people and information among the separate areas. So this happens in a mass society, that how in a way people as well as the commodities, they are moving from one place to another, and information is also being shared on a large scale as well. And then you also talk about the idea of standardization of the many aspects of society which are helpful for mobility. And we see that how many aspects of society, they become standardized over a period of time, and it also help in the mobility of the people. And the increased specialization which is happening, and the interdependence of the different parts of the society, that is also happening in a mass society, that people, they are becoming more and more specialized, and then they are interdependent on each other for the various in different parts of the society. So in that sense, we find that modernity can be apparently contradictory in nature, but these features listed are different parts of an overall ontology of this process. And when you talk about modernity, when we talk about culture, we find that when the elements or the products of modernity invade another culture through popular processes such as various cultural aspects such as folk tales and cinema, there is a widespread overhaul of cultural and social ontology, and these tend to change in society and prepare it for further changes as well. So this results in a homogenization of culture and creates widespread diversification at local level. So we find that how the arrival of the various kinds of mass media, the arrival of cinema for that matter, and how cinema in a way pervades in that sense. And we find that especially nowadays, we talk about, when you talk about the films of the North India and the South India, in South India has emerged in that sense various kinds of languages, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada and Malayalam, and how these films, they are doing so well in the northern regions, even when people, they are not aware about the language, because films, they are being made in different languages, they are being dubbed as well, because of which they have a wider reach. And this in a way also helps in that sense, that some kind of a change is happening at the cultural level, and how society is also ready for the further changes. Some of the recent blockbusters of India, they have been made in south of India, and how they are being appreciated in northern region as well. So we find that this also could be seen in the framework of the homogenization of the culture, that how people from the different cultures, they are in a way are liking that kind of other culture which was not available to them earlier, because many of the films which are made in northern region, they did not have the language of the south, they were not being dubbed as well, the subtitles, they were not available, or many of the films which are made in south of India, their subtitles and dubbing was not at all done. So this kind of homogenization is also an aspect which could be seen. And when you talk about that how all these kinds of aspects in the framework of the mass media, they are helpful in the framework of the proliferation of different aspects of modernity and culture. And scholars like Gennard Dentley, they have argued that there are other features such as democratic government and hierarchical structures within it, and also does private sector grow greatly in influence. So, we find that when you talk about the democratic government, which is again an important feature of modernity, and we also find the hierarchical structures within it as well, because we find that modernity will also talk about the idea of equality, but at the same time it will also create some kind of a hierarchy with the kind of a specialization which is there in that particular part of society. Then we also see that how over a period of time it also sometimes creates a friction, and modernity can be perceived as being totalitarian as well in that sense. And we find that when there is some kind of friction in the society, then how the forces which are more dominant, they will try to control the other forces, and many times it can also lead to some kind of totalitarianism as well. But we find that how the individual in the modernity, they belong to some kind of subsystems, those subsystems, and is part of competition, liberty and individualism. And we find that the people, those who are there, the individuals, those who are in the modernity, they belong to those subsystems as well. And we also see that this is all the more true for the comparison of modernity with societies that are traditional in nature. So, we find that how modernity brought with it many blessings to people, including much better health and economic prospects, because we find that modern health care, in that sense, the coming of the better health facilities, the arrival of various kinds of vaccines, and then better health care, and then the rise in the standard of living of people with the framework of the economic prospects which are there. But we also have to see it in the framework of how it also created a number of inequalities in the society, and how this better health which we talk about is also within the framework of commercialization which is there in the society, and how this commercialization is an important component of the healthcare system. And many a times we find that those who do not have money, those who are at the margins, they are not able to avail the costly health care which is available. And we find that when you talk about the modern society, we just only cannot talk about the positive aspects. There are so many other negative aspects which are connected to it, whether the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during the World War, or the arms race in that sense. Because when you talk about the developments in modernity, we also talk about developments in the military technology, and because of which we find different nations, they are fighting with each other for producing the better arms and ammunitions. And they are not only using those arms and ammunitions which are being made by them, but they are also supplying them to other regions as well. And the regions which are at the conflict, if they use such kind of weapons, then the world would be in some kind of a great danger as well. And that is why we find that whenever there is some kind of a conflict, there is some kind of a idea of conflict which might take place in a particular region, then how different countries of the world, whether through some kind of a collective effort, through UNO and other kinds of bodies which are there in the framework of the resolution of those conflicts, they try to mitigate this kind of a conflict, because we cannot afford such kind of a conflict now, because if it escalates into some kind of a world war like a situation, then the entire world would be in a great danger. Apart from that, we also see that how the environmental degradation is another important concept which is related to modernity, in that sense that many times the kind of progress which is happening in the society because of modernity and the modern development, we find that environmental degradation is at the receiving end. and because of which there is a lot of air and water pollution which we witness. And we also see that how modernity also creates great stress on the people and alienation as well. We find that how people, they become more and more individual, the kind of timelines which are there, which they have set for themselves, and many a times these individuals, they feel alienated from the society. They are living in the world of their own, and they are not in a way interacting with other individuals in the society. They are largely concerned with the kind of technology which is available to them. And in recent times, a lot of debate is with regard to the mobile technology which is there, that how it is affecting the mental health of the people, how people, they become addicted to it, how some of the people, they have at the receiving end from the physical point of view, when mobiles, they have exploded, or too much usage of the mobiles. It has also created some kind of a deformity in certain individuals. So we find that in modernity is again some kind of an aspect which can be seen in the framework of the contemporary developments as well. And so we have to in a way discuss whether modernity is positive, is socially positive or not, or it has proved beneficial or not to the world or to the society in that sense. So in that sense, when we tend to understand, we in a way realize that it has both the positive as well as the negative aspects, and modernity as a juggernaut we have to see. And Giddens' position in this regard is that the conflicts with the contention that society has entered into a post-modern world. So we find that modernity witnesses tremendous increase in the scope, pace and the depth of change relative to systems that preceded it. Or we have to see that how, in that sense, when we tend to understand it from the Giddens' point of view, Giddens has argued that the modernity implies capitalism, industrialism, surveillance program and activities, and military power. So he is in a way has talked about these kinds of aspects, that how modernity can be seen in only in the framework, not only in the framework of capitalism, but also in industrialism, surveillance programs and activities, and the military power. And when we tend to understand these kinds of aspects, that these kinds of phenomena, they have taken some time in terms of whether you talk about capitalism with its three phases, the merchant capitalism, industrial capitalism and finance capitalism, and over a period of time how capitalism entrenched itself in the world, and how capitalism is still being criticized on the ground that it is creating a lot of inequalities in the society, or industrialism for that matter, that how the industrially developed world, and then you have a world where there is no industrial development, the world which is being seen in the framework of the not developed, or maybe it is many a times, or it is also being argued in the framework of the developing world. And when you talk about the surveillance program and activities, that how the various kinds of gadgets which we have, even mobile phones for that matter, or internet usage, and how this kind of a surveillance on individuals, it is being created. We find that our communication technologies, they are in a way trying to see what we are doing or what we are talking about, and this is how surveillance programs, they are being created. And next is the military power, where we find that how military technology is an important component of modernity, and the developments of the various types of military technology. In that sense, it also plays an important role in the framework of the developing of the notions of the modernity. And we find that when you talk about the pre-modern societies, time and space, they were being seen as interconnected. But when you talk about modernity, time and space were no longer closely linked, and this interconnection became very weak in that sense. So when you talk about like scholars like Giddens, how he has talked about the theory of structuration and its basic components adequately describe modernity, and these elements are distanciation or separation in of time and space, and disembedding and reflexivity. So, we find that scholars, they have tried to see the various components in a particular framework, and they have also talked about that how these components, they explain or in a way describe modernity. And when you talk about distanciation in or the separation of the time and space, which was not existing in the pre-modern societies, and other aspects we find when you talk about distanciation, it helps in the establishment of the organizations and bureaucracy, and makes possible nation state which is international. That is it is possible to connect local and the global arenas. Again, when you talk about the modern society, it is within the matrix of the history, and it takes from that to influence the present as well. Then we also see that finally such kind of distanciation makes possible second of Giddens factors of modernity, that is disembedding. And when you talk about it, it is itself a process of transcending local context, and it's reorganizing itself along indefinite stretches of time and space. And according to Giddens, there are two varieties of disembedding factors, and one is the symbolic tokens, which is the money, and this allows for time space distanciation and allows money transactions with those who are widely separated in time and space. And then it is the system of the professional expertise, and they are also very useful because they help create environment. And some experts, they include the doctors and the lawyers and other experts, they affect everyday commodities and even property. So, we see that how when Giddens is talking about these kinds of ideas, and one is talking about the symbolic tokens like money, then how it in a way talks about the time space distanciation, and how the money transactions with those who are widely separated in time and space, that also happens. So, we find that the expert systems, they provide the reassurance across time and space. And again, in the abstract systems, trust is fundamental not only to the modern societies, also because symbolic tokens and expert systems served to disembed society in the modern world. So, we find that how an economy which is based on monetary transactions and legal system, they work because members have trust in them. And again, another important basic characteristic of modernity is the phenomena of reflexivity. All social and psychological aspects, processes, events can be reflected upon. They can be in a way seen how we try to understand them, how we try to understand them better, and working as an activity that influences further development of a phenomena. So, the fact of this embedment indicates the need for trust, as we talked about the need for the expert systems. And trust, when you talk about, Giddens says that it is socialized into children and then reinforced by behavior that conforms to this expectation of mutually reliable behaviors. So, trust from that point of view is in a way how it is socialized into children, how children they learn it, and how we behave in the society, so that we conform to that this kind of expectation of mutually reliable behaviors which are there. However, this is also in a way accompanied by destabilizing factors, risk factors that threaten trust and create an ongoing lack of security in people. So, we find that when you talk about the idea of trust, we also find that there are certain destabilizing factors as well, the kind of risk factors which are there, which are in a way affecting trust in a negative manner, and this in a way creates some kind of a lack of security in people. And when you talk about in these kinds of aspect in further details, we find that the risk of the nuclear wars is neither fought nor won. and the risk factor in the global or the local war is such that several kind of dangers, the points have arisen, and the disarmament of the military of the nuclear warheads could easily be one of the international projects to increase sense of security for subjects. So, this is also to be seen in that framework, that how the risk of nuclear wars is neither fought nor won in that sense. And we also have to see that how some kind of danger points which are there, and how the disarmament of the military of the nuclear warheads is an important concern of the international community, so that people feel safe and secure in this kind of a society. And Giddens also takes it further in the framework that how the risk factor it extends into material environment, and which can be done to prevent its degradation, whether you talk about forest or the rivers, rural and the urban hospitals. And again, the global investments which are existing in the institutional settings, they are also risky. Subjects take notice of the risks while taking the action as well. So, we find that how scholars, they have in a way tried to understand them, how the risk factor it is to be seen in the framework of the material environment as well, and what can be done to in a way protect the environment, how further kind of a degradation does not take place, and how we have to safeguard the various kinds of habitat, forest, rivers, and the urban and the rural habitats in which people are living. And we also have to see that how it is also linked to the global investments as well, because how the issue of development and environment, both of them they are linked. So, we will talk about further about these aspects of modernity in our next lecture. Thank you very much.